Hey guys, Lokai here, and no, your eyes and ears do not deceive you. This is not, I didn't type out the wrong title or anything. No, this is actually a Let's Talk About. So I've been doing a bit of cleanup on my YouTube channel, here and there, renaming some videos, kind of making more dedicated series and whatever. And you might have noticed on my Sonic videos, particularly my Let's Talk About Sonic 1, Sonic 2, CD, and how I got into Sonic, I renamed them into a Let's Talk About. But I never actually went over what I want the series to be because it initially wasn't even called those. It was just called a typical Let's Talk or a random ramble where I just ramble about Sonic and some of his first few games and how I got into the franchise and such. So I figure I would talk about what Let's Talk About is before I get into what I'm actually going to talk about. Let's Talk About, I wanted to be a series where I can just talk about different franchises and different avenues of it. Basically, just talk about stuff that I am into, franchises I'm into, and go over my history with them as well as the history of the franchise itself, and just talk about it from my perspective. So, usually I want to go in order. Like for Sonic, I'm going in order of the games. I'm going in Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic CD, and Sonic 3K, which is the next video I have up, which I am still working on. It will happen. It's taking a lot of time. I don't really have anything more to say about that video other than that, but it will happen. However, I didn't just want this series to be about Sonic. I wanted to talk about other stuff. I wanted to talk about Star Wars. I wanted to talk about Kingdom Hearts, Devil May Cry, stuff like that. So, I figure, maybe a nice reintroduction to this series, a fresh introduction, would be in order. And while you could sort of say it started with Sonic, you could also take this to be an official start, a more official start, if you want to. Either way, I want to make this series more legitimate, and since the Sonic 3K video is going to take a while, I figure I would shift gears a bit and talk about a different franchise. One I've recently been getting back into, Star Wars. 'Cause why not? I like Star Wars.
I f***ing love Star Wars!
So, what made me want to make this video and talk about Star Wars was, I've been getting back into the franchise recently due to Revenge of the Sith, my first Star Wars movie actually, getting re-released in theaters for its 20th anniversary. It was my first time watching it in theaters because I didn't actually watch it in the original theatrical run. I did watch it when it came out on DVD, obviously, but I never actually went to see any of the main 6 George Lucas movies in theaters. My first theatrical Star Wars experience would come a little bit later, and I'll talk about that since I'm sure some people will be shocked. No, it's not Force Awakens. Because of that, it kind of made me go like, oh, I should talk about Star Wars sometime. I should, talk about how big of an impact it had on my childhood. Another reason why was because I have talked about Star Wars in the past a couple of times, and most of the time it's been fairly negative. I make it no secret that I haven't really been a big fan of how Disney's been handling Star Wars. There have been some diamonds in the rough, some of which I am watching now, like Andor Season 2. I didn't watch it when it was airing, but I am watching it now. I'm sort of catching up on it, and so far, it's amazing. I've watched the first arc, and it is so good. It's like the show just picked up where it left off and just keeps getting better, and I already thought Season 1 was great, so yeah. Andor, so far, Season 2, really good. Not sure when I'm going to be able to talk about Andor, so I figure I'll just mention it here. I've also been getting back into Star Wars Battlefront. I've been rewatching my favorite arcs and episodes of both Rebels and TCW, the Clone Wars, for those who don't know. I've been getting into how these things are developed, looking at documentaries and, parts of, bonus features, basically. Little documentaries, little mini like videos and bonus features that show how this was made and that was made. Tons of stuff. I have been getting back into Star Wars in a big way, and I wanted to talk about it. And, you know, that's why I'm making this video now. But I also want to talk a little more positively about the franchise because, you know, I don't just want to be a negative Nancy the entire time. I do love this franchise, and it, you know, most of the time when I talk about it, I usually talk about the new stuff that I'm not really a huge fan of, with a couple of exceptions, and, you know, Disney's mismanagement, and believe me, I will continue to talk about it. I may actually do another Star Wars rant in the future, sooner rather than later, but before I make any more negative videos, I want to speak more positively on the franchise, why I love it, why I do still call myself a Star Wars fan, in spite of how badly I think Disney has mismanaged the brand. I still do care for this franchise, and I want to express that. And so that's why I'm making this this video series now, because there's a lot of stuff I love from this franchise, and I want to show that. And I see no better place to start with than starting with how I got into Star Wars. And it was from my brother. So I've talked about my brother a bit as well, for various reasons. My brother was, you know, he and I were very close, and he was what got me into Star Wars. However, it wasn't actually from any of the movies. It was actually from Star Wars Battlefront, the 2004 game. I'm not kidding. I don't exactly remember when I played it. It might have been late 2004, early 2005. I know it was around the time when Revenge of the Sith was around the corner. And because of that, my brother was really excited. He was playing a lot of Star Wars stuff because he was excited to see Revenge of the Sith. A lot of people were. But I got into the franchise because of him playing that game. I watched him play it. I wanted to play it for myself. Mom hated the fact that my brother got me into a shooter game, even though it was Star Wars, which is really funny, but I played it anyway, despite her disapproving. I did that a couple of times. I wasn't a bad kid, I got away with some stuff that I probably shouldn't have. But either way, I loved it. I loved Star Wars Battlefront. I still love it, honestly. It has aged a bit because Battlefront 2, the 2005 game, is so much better, but I still enjoy the original game, and I'll be using footage of it for this video in the background, because of course I will. But yeah, I played that game to bits. I played it split screen on the PlayStation 2 with my brother almost every day for a good chunk of time. However, despite me being a fan of the first Battlefront game, I wasn't exactly chomping at the bit to see Revenge of the Sith. I had not seen a Star Wars movie up to that point. And so I didn't actually see Revenge of the Sith in theaters because of that. It wouldn't be until the theatrical re-release this year that I actually went and saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters. Now, my first time seeing Revenge of the Sith was when it came out on DVD, so I had seen it up to that point many times, but my first time seeing it in theaters was this year. I did not see it when it first came out, because, again, I had no real reason to. I was a fan of one of the video games, but that was about it. Eventually, Battlefront 2 was, coming out. It came out the year after Star Wars Battlefront 1, and because of that, me and Shane were really looking forward to that. My mother and Shane went to see Revenge of the Sith in theaters. I didn't go to see it because, again, I just didn't really have any interest. I don't really know what I did that day. I just know I was offered a chance to go and I didn't, and I wish I did, but, I was a kid at the time. I didn't know how much I would love Star Wars until a little later in the year. So, a while later, Star Wars Battlefront 2 did come out, as well as Star Wars Episode 3 on DVD. Shane brought both of them home one day, and even though I wanted to play Battlefront 2 so desperately, because, oh my goodness, this game is so fun, the sequel's out, I want to play it, he wanted to watch Revenge of the Sith first, and I grumbled a bit because it's like I don't want to watch a fucking movie. I want to play a fucking video game. All right, you want to play the goddamn game. But we watched Revenge of the Sith, and I loved it. as a kid. I loved the lightsaber duels. I loved just the action. I couldn't really follow the story that well because, you know, I was a kid. But I still followed it well enough, and I still enjoyed all of the lightsaber duel, the spectacle of it all. I enjoyed how dark it was. I enjoyed seeing Order 66, even though I had no idea why it was such a pivotal moment. I enjoyed seeing Anakin become Vader, and, you know, my brother filled me in on a few things, but I didn't really get much of the film at the time. It wasn't until I watched the original trilogy shortly after that I was able to finally understand, oh, that connects to that, which did make me appreciate Revenge of the Sith more at the time as a kid. But yeah, we watched Revenge of the Sith. I loved it. I didn't stay angry with him for very long about not being able to play Star Wars Battlefront 2. And, you know, of course, after we watched the movie, then we played the game, and oh, it was so good. I remember being so hyped when I got to play as a leader for the first time. Like, I knew it was a feature because I read the back of the box, but experiencing it for the first time was just such a cool thing, you know? Just getting to play as a Jedi, especially right after watching Revenge of the Sith, where I see the Jedi actually doing all of the lightsaber twirling and flippy shit they do. Yeah, it was so cool. Maybe that is one of the reasons why I'm so into the Jedi and Sith and the Force and lightsabers and all of that. More so than other parts of Star Wars, even though I do love other parts of Star Wars, like the warfare and the space battles and the blaster battles. My favorite part of Star Wars has always been the stuff with the Jedi, and lightsaber combat in particular is something I've always been interested in. I love lightsabers, just in general. I'll probably gush about how much I love lightsabers at some point. That's a video I should definitely make, because I could gush about how much I love lightsabers, their design, their elegance, you know, how civilized they are. Okay, maybe not. Either way, I love lightsabers. I love fictional weapons in general, and lightsabers are one of my favorites, and I'll make a video talking about that one day. Either way, yeah, my introduction was through Star Wars Battlefront, and, you know, eventually I played the sequel, but before that I watched Revenge of the Sith, and it was my first Star Wars movie because of my brother. Eventually, my brother would show me the original trilogy, and I loved all of them as well. I did not see Attack of the Clones and Episode 1, Phantom Menace, until a little bit later. I think it was... I forget exactly the time, but it was a good couple of months before I watched them after watching the original trilogy. But with the original trilogy, I remember loving all of the connections to Revenge of the Sith. I remember, like, oh, this Anakin guy, he becomes Darth Vader, and, oh, holy shit, Darth Vader's so freaking cool, and I remember, you know, being so emotional when Luke was able to save his father and redeem him. You know, I loved, I even liked the Ewoks, or at least I didn't mind them, you know. I remember seeing the Ewoks, seeing the Ewoks fighting the Stormtroopers, and I enjoyed those moments, as silly as they are, and we'll get to it when we get to it. I don't remember all that much about my first viewing of the films. I remember a little bit about Revenge of the Sith, not so much about my viewing of the original trilogies, but I know I did greatly enjoy them. I also remember really loving A New Hope, just rewatching that film. One of my earliest memories with A New Hope was I remember getting a portable DVD player, and I just remember rewatching A New Hope over and over and over and not getting sick of it. I don't know why. I should have gotten sick of it. I would get sick of it nowadays, but I don't know. Something about that movie, man, just drew me to it. And yeah, it was the special editions. It was the 2004 DVD releases, which I'll show in the background. I'll show my set, because why not show my Star Wars memorabilia. But yeah, it was the special editions, but I didn't know any better at the time. Obviously, if I could go back and watch the original versions, I would, but I was a kid, and I didn't really care for the weird CGI and the changes made, or the Jedi Rocks CGI monstrosity song that... God, what was Lucas thinking? There were other things, however, that I got into with Star Wars. Obviously, I started with video games. I started with the Battlefront duology, and I played that to bits. But I also played LEGO Star Wars. I greatly enjoyed LEGO Star Wars 1. I really enjoyed LEGO Star Wars 2, and was very upset when I found out that LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga was not available for PlayStation 2, and I was very upset by that, but I did eventually get around to playing it. I played the Revenge of the Sith video game, which honestly didn't really grab me at the time. Nowadays, I really like it. I think it's a great game, but at the time, I didn't really care for it that much. I thought it was kind of boring. I liked the multiplayer mode. The duel mode was pretty fun, but I didn't really care for the campaign. Nowadays, though, I played it recently, and I don't know why, but I don't know why I dismissed it as a kid. I really enjoy the Revenge of the Sith video game. It's honestly really underrated. I would recommend, if you ever get the chance, pick it up. It has some of my favorite lightsaber combat. In some ways better than Jedi Fallen Order, even though I do like Jedi Fallen Order. I played other video games as well. I can't remember all of the ones I played, but you know, I would get into other Star Wars media as well. One of my favorite pieces of older Star Wars content was the 2D animated Clone Wars show. Not the CG one, even though I did like that show and I grew up on it. I loved the 2D Clone Wars stuff, and I still love that. It's basically Samurai Jack Star Wars, but I didn't know much about Samurai Jack until years later, so this was my introduction to what Samurai Jack kind of was. This wasn't my introduction to Genndy Tartakovsky's work. I did watch Dexter's Lab beforehand, but I didn't watch much of Samurai Jack, and Symbionic Titan wasn't out at the time, so this was my first time watching one of his action shows, and it's still an absolute spectacle. I remember rewatching Grievous just slaughtering Jedi over and over again in that show. I love Volume 2. Volume 2 was what I started with. Eventually, I did watch Volume 1, and I enjoyed that as well, but I remember rewatching Volume 2 in particular, and just being in awe at just how badass General Grievous was, and being so pissed that he wasn't like that in the movie. And yeah, I know why. It made sense within the context of, oh, Mace Windu crushed his lungs with the Force, and that's why he became so lame, but he felt like such a different character in Revenge of the Sith. You know, granted, I watched Revenge of the Sith before I watched the 2D Clone Wars, so, you know, but when I look back on it, I looked back at like Revenge of the Sith, and was like, why wasn't Grievous like this? He was so badass, and yet he gets taken out by Obi-Wan? Just one Jedi? Like, what is this shit? You know, obviously, I know why Grievous became the way he is in the film and TCW, but, you know, for a time, Grievous was my favorite character, but really, it was only because of the 2D cartoon. Just showed him being such a powerhouse, and I still love the 2D Clone Wars. Seriously, if you haven't seen the 2D cartoon for Clone Wars, you're missing out. It's one of the best pieces of Star Wars. It's definitely one of my favorite pieces, and I look forward to talking about it one day, because I will talk about it. It will get its own video, and, you know, I don't know which piece of work will get its own video and which won't, but That's one of them. I love that show. I remember rewatching that over and over and over again. In 2008, by the time I had finally watched all of the films, because it took me a bit to watch Episode 2 and Episode 1, but eventually I did. I did go back to Episode 2. It took me a bit longer to go back to Episode 1, because I just had a bitch of a time getting it. I had Episode 2. My brother had Episode 2 on DVD, but he didn't have Episode 1. It wouldn't be until a little while later where I finally got to watch Episode 1. I don't exactly remember when. I honestly didn't really think much of those movies, and to be honest, I still don't, but that will be for a later time. I liked Episode 2 at the time more than Episode 1, because Episode 2, you know, had a bunch of action. The Geonosis battle reminded me of the Battlefront games, and, you know, I really enjoyed that. But you know, I didn't really care much for Count Dooku. Nowadays, he's one of my favorite characters, but keep in mind, as a kid, at the time, he didn't really leave much of an impression. I didn't really care much for Anakin and Padme's romance. It wasn't bad. There were parts of it I liked. It wasn't like an awful movie to me as a kid, but it's one that had my attention drift a little bit. I thought Jango was pretty cool. I, again, enjoyed the Geonosis battle, but that was about it. I didn't really rewatch it that much. And Episode 1 I rewatched even less because I was really bored by it. I do hold a little more respect for it nowadays, but at the time I thought it was so boring. I enjoyed the lightsaber duel, but that was basically about it. I didn't really like Phantom Menace that much as a kid. But, you know, I still enjoyed rewatching Revenge of the Sith. I still enjoyed that film. And that would mostly stay throughout the ages. But, you know, I didn't really care much for Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, even though I did watch them. However, that wouldn't be the end of my enjoyment for Star Wars. My enjoyment of it did drift a little bit as time went on, but I would always get back into it because there was always some piece of Star Wars content that was coming out that I did have interest in, especially when it came to the video games and, of course, TCW. 2008 was a very big year for me with Star Wars because Force Unleashed was coming out, and you know, it was a very odd. It was very odd because, like, 2008 was a time where we had two pieces of work where Anakin had an apprentice with Ahsoka, and Vader got a secret apprentice with Starkiller, or Galen Marek. I'm going to call him Starkiller for the rest of the time. And I remember being so confused. It's like, what? I thought there could only be two Sith. What are you talking about? Darth Vader never had an apprentice. Wait, Anakin has this annoying half-pint apprentice that sounds really annoying, and she wields her lightsaber weird. Although, not for nothing, I did really enjoy the reverse grip. It's one of my favorite lightsaber styles. But, you know, it was so weird. But I wanted to watch them. I was a kid. I loved Star Wars, and it would lead me to consume both Force Unleashed, the PlayStation 2 version. No, not the super pretty HD version. I wouldn't play that until later. I played the PlayStation 2 version first, and it was one of the first games that I remember beating. It wasn't the first game I beat. There were others. Like, I think Battlefront 2 I was able to beat. But it was one of the first games I remember my first time completing, at least to an extent. And I remember enjoying the story and being surprised at where it went. I knew that Starkiller was probably going to betray Vader and join the rebellion. I did not know he would be responsible for the start of the rebellion, but I thought Starkiller was one of the coolest characters. I love how edgy and cool he was. You know, he didn't have the reverse grip that he had in the HD version, because they wanted to have the PlayStation 2 version and the Wii version, particularly the Wii version. The Wii version had motion controls, so they wanted to accurately have the swing, they wanted to have the swing of a Wiimote match a lightsaber swing. But in order to do that, they really couldn't do a reverse grip. So Starkiller wielded his lightsaber normally in the PlayStation 2 version because that was, for all intents and purposes, a downgraded version of the Wii version. Or at least that is what it was meant to be. And so that's why it matched. Whereas the HD version was the more legitimate version, it was the main version, and that was the one that had Starkiller using the reverse grip, Degem So, or a variant of it, I believe what it is. I didn't know that at the time, of course. I didn't really know much about lightsaber styles, but of course now I know all about it. But at the time I didn't know it was Degem So, which I believe is what, or a variant of Degem So, which is what the reverse grip usually does. Like Ahsoka uses it, and Starkiller uses it. Kylo Ren actually uses it, although it doesn't really look that great in live action, if I'm being honest here. Either way, it was really weird seeing both Darth Vader and Anakin both have apprentices, and at the time I didn't make the connection until a little bit later, but it was a very, very, very odd time because it was just so confusing. Like, both Darth Vader and Anakin both had apprentices. It was very weird. Either way, I still played Force Unleashed. I still loved it. I played it to completion. I loved how overpowered Galen Merrick was, being this badass Sith assassin. I enjoyed the boss fights, and I really enjoyed how Starkiller, the badass character I was playing as, was what forged the rebellion. And to be honest, even though it doesn't really work in canon, especially now, at the time, I did really like the idea that, Darth Vader and Palpatine sort of unwittingly created the rebellion, in a way. That sort of led to their demise. Now, sure, that, if you look at Star Wars as a whole, it doesn't really line up with the original films, especially when Bail Organa is concerned, but, I still think overall the story holds some merit. I still enjoy the story of Force Unleashed. Is it a power fantasy? Absolutely. But it is also a video game, that people do have to remember that. And, we have a much more legitimate, I think better fits in canon story with Star Wars Rebels and Andor. So, it's not as if, they even use some references from Force Unleashed. Of course, at the time I bitched because I liked Force Unleashed, and I wasn't happy that Rebels was overriding it, but thankfully I ended up loving Rebels, so I didn't stay mad for that long. I'll talk about what my thoughts were on the Disney buyout in a little bit, but right now it's 2008. Force Unleashed was the next major Star Wars product I consumed, but I did go see Star Wars The Clone Wars, the movie, in theaters. I was a big fan of the 2D show, and I wanted another Star Wars cartoon just like that. It was a little weird that it was CGI, but I always heard rumors that there would be another Star Wars cartoon, and it would take place in the Clone Wars. And I was like, oh yes, more of that, please, more of the 2D show. Of course, it was a CGI show, but I didn't care. I liked CGI shows, so, fine, whatever. More Star Wars Clone Wars. That's what I wanted. And, I went to see Star Wars The Clone Wars, the movie, in theaters with my brother and a few others. I'm not sure if my mother joined me for that or not, but either way, that was my first theatrical Star Wars experience. The first time I saw a Star Wars movie in theaters was for TCW. And when I watched the movie, I didn't hate it. I was at the right age where I could ignore some of the more glaring flaws with that film, if you want to call it a film. At the time, I didn't really know much about the behind-the-scenes of it, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but I did have some gripes with it. For one thing, it wasn't exactly like the 2D show. The action wasn't quite as strong. They were still finding their footing with the CGI, and you could tell it was... Early TCW could be very stiff. But I also just didn't care for Ahsoka. Ahsoka as a character, I found really annoying. She did get better as time went on, thankfully, but at the time she was really whiny. Funnily enough, I didn't put two and two together that she was very similar to Anakin from the prequels, where he was also very whiny. I liked Anakin as a kid, but, when you watch the movies, you realize, wow, Anakin and Luke are kind of whiners. Looking back. I guess it just runs in the family. Though Ahsoka's not related by blood, she might as well be related as sort of a younger sister of sorts, an annoying younger sister. Either way, I still enjoyed the film for what it was. I especially enjoyed the Battle of Teth, like the sideways battle where the tanks are going up a cliff. That was really neat. That was a neat part. But, eventually the TV show came out, and I do remember enjoying it a lot more. I was pretty excited for the TV show. The movie wasn't great, but I still was interested to see what they would do. And thankfully, as the TV show kept going, it did get better and better. The show kept getting better, the animation got better, the lightsaber duels got better. And I kept up with TCW for a good chunk of time. But I stopped around season 3, which I know is where people say the show picks up. And, I still enjoyed the show for what it was, but I did stop kind of, getting in, looking forward as other stuff would catch my attention. And I would take a break from TCW until years later, where, over the course of many, many years, it took me to finally finish some of the later seasons. And I did really enjoy those when I watched them. I did watch season 4, or at least good chunks of it, and season 3, as it was airing a little bit. I caught some of the late season 3 episodes as they were airing. I remember watching the Citadel arc. I remember watching the stuff with Ventress and the Night Sisters and Savage, being baffled that Darth Maul was somehow still alive, and being like, well, how is he still alive? He was chopped in half. And, seeing some of the episodes of Season 4. Not any of the Darth Maul stuff, though. I wouldn't watch that until a bit later. And I was also shocked when I heard Sam Witwer, Starkiller, was voicing Darth Maul. I was like, wow, that's, of course, eventually I would watch the Darth Maul stuff, and he would become one of my favorite characters. Like, TCW really turned Maul from just kind of a final boss of Phantom Menace into a much more legitimate character. He's one of my favorite Star Wars characters now. But yeah, I watched TCW as it was airing. I have various memories with that, and I'll get into that when I talk more about TCW. But yeah, 2008 was the next big year for me with Star Wars, and I was keeping up with the TV show up until season 2. I remember seeing all of the advertisements for, some of the arcs, like with Boba Fett, and, some of the early TCW. I remember some of the promos for Cartoon Network, being shocked by how violent some of the episodes were. And I remember playing Force Unleashed as well. Force Unleashed was one of my favorite parts of Star Wars as well. But, eventually I would, stop following Star Wars for a brief time as other stuff took my interest. My interest in Star Wars my interest in a lot of things kind of works in waves. Like, for a good chunk of time, I'll be all over something. But eventually, that interest will wane, and I'll take a break from it, and then my interest will be caught by the franchise again a little bit later. And then, I'll get into it, super into it, and then I'll stop, being into it and move on to something else. It kind of goes in waves, like it did with the Sonic franchise, and that's the case for a lot of stuff I like. Star Wars is really no exception. I am a little more into it and keep up with it more now than I did when I was a kid, because, now we have access to the internet, and, information is only a click away, so I'm able to keep up with it a lot more now than I was before. But at the time, my interest in Star Wars was in waves. It started with Star Wars Battlefront, where I watched the original trilogy, played Battlefront 2, played Lego Star Wars, and watched Revenge of the Sith and the original trilogy, and then it kind of petered out a bit, and then it came back with Force Unleashed and TCW for a good chunk of time, and then it sort of petered out. The next big moment for Star Wars, however, would be with the Disney buyout. I think what took my interest away was probably, it was a number of things. School. I was entering high school around that time. I forget when I entered high school. I think I graduated in 2015, so it was around 2010. Even though I had been keeping up with the Iron Man films, because I watched Iron Man in theaters. I don't remember much about that theatrical experience, but I remember watching it in theaters with my brother and one of his friends. And I remember watching Iron Man 2. This was when the MCU was really starting to hit its stride with the Avengers. The Avengers was slowly being announced. Thor and Captain America Winter Soldier were coming out, and it was taking up some of my interest. I was getting back into Sonic, I believe, around 2012 as well. The next big thing for Star Wars for me was with the Disney buyout, because the Disney buyout was such a big, big deal for Star Wars.